All right, we're back. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I'm super excited for our discussion. We've got Jeff Weniger, head of equities at Wisdom Tree, macro ninja, and maybe most importantly, Jeff, fellow Chicagoan. We were just talking a bit about the city and our travels off camera, but welcome to the show, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Let's just jump right into it. I mean, I look around and I see Micron seemingly going up 10% every single day, stock markets at all-time highs. The narrative, as I think I understand it, is just invest in the AI build out. You got nothing to worry about. It can't be this easy, though. I mean, what is everybody missing? Like, what kind of bucks this consensus trend here?
Yeah, and just think about how much different everything's been from the March 30
All right.
doldrums, I guess you could say. I mean, the VIX was at something like 32 at the time and just totally melting up. It's weird market internals because if you think about it, I mean, it's vertical in everything tech, everything AI build out, and then a whole lot of lack of activity in most other sectors in the S&P 500. Look, you're in that to the extent that you're tracking the S&P or the Russell 1000. You're in the AI trade, whether you like it or not. And it does have some of those vibes. XYZ Corp up 10% today, and then ABC Corp up 10% tomorrow, and Cisco, and you mentioned Micron, and total melt-ups in the likes of Seagate and Western Digital and what have you. And we're pulling data. I mean, this is what we do over at Wisdom Tree with some frequency, is take a look at market trends and market internals, really. And in the last 6 weeks or so, growth has been absolutely trouncing several other subcomponents of the broad market by orders of magnitude that are akin to basically 25, 26 years ago in some respects. Minvol left for dead. More than left for dead. Dead. Just absolutely dead in the water. And then you have smart beta players like us saying, what's even going on in some parts of the market? So it's some wild action. I think at some point you have to start getting a little question marky, if you will.
You visualize this data perfectly on your Twitter feed. So everybody needs to go out and follow Jeff here on Twitter, or X now, excuse me. And I want to dig into a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of just the outperformance of a handful of names that are involved in that theme. But as you described, this mega cap growth versus this minimum or low volatility.
Yeah.
You mentioned that we're at levels that you don't see all that often. At this point, do you think that that's a signal that maybe there is a top in that trade, or do you think that that continues?
Well, I mean, the thing is at this point, it's like every single pod we do, you tack another 100 points on the S&P. I mean, it's 7,500 now on the S&P, and 76, 77. Who knows where we're going next on this? I mean, generally speaking, if you have a stock market at its highs or at all-time highs, it does follow through to new all-time highs. So it's counterintuitive. It usually goes against where your logic would have you. I mean, you're on 2026 earnings, you're at 21, 22 times probably a good 22 times earnings now with this rally following through. We've hypothesized that with the street consensus having 22% earnings for this year, that can come through for reasons of the past tense Jay Powell rate cuts. We can get into that if you want. But they're looking for earnings growth that's heady in 26 and 27. And so generally speaking, you pull up these 40, 50-year charts of the broad market, and it tracks close, it mirrors or it rhymes earnings trends. And we should be having double-digit earnings in 26 and 27. The issue is at some point, does it peter out and we have some disappointment in 28 or 29 on the earnings front? That seems like the distant future, but you start thinking about 2028 in late 2026. So it's going to be an issue at some point if we continue to have these firms just clocking again and again record revenue growth, record earnings growth, but the CapEx expenditure. I guess it would be the expanding CapEx expenditure.
CapEx, yeah.
That's a very real issue, and I think it's something that we all need. We can't just blow that off, Ryan. It's very real in the out years.
Let's talk about that, because when you look at the multiple of price to free cash flow, not quite at I would say not quite at 2000 levels, but getting closer. I mean, is that the key thing to watch here? At some point, I would assume either, well, I guess on the positive side, you see that growth and you see free cash flow pick up in terms of, versus the capital expenditures, or maybe people just get impatient, investors become impatient, or I think maybe worst case scenario, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, you see, that CapEx trend reverse. And then that maybe is the domino into a lot of others related to the AI build out trade. Like, how do you think about that setup and where we are kind of versus where we've been historically with some of these multiples?
You think about the years in the business, the things that we focus on at any given time. And like right now, we as a market are going to focus on private credit, Strait of Hormuz, and what have you. And then next year it'll be something else. So we don't know what that something else is. And talking about earnings and talking about free cash flow or cash flows in general. The value of a stock is the net present value of future free cash flows. I mean, that's what we are all taught basically our freshman or sophomore year. But that doesn't stop me 3 minutes ago from talking about a price earnings ratio. And because the street wants to focus on earnings when the street wants to, and that's not a decision for me and you to make, it's for the street to make. And then it decides to focus on free cash flow when it comes time for that. And so that's going to be a potential issue. I mean, because if you think about some of the big names dominating, well, first off, you want to talk about a total machine. NVIDIA's like 8.5% of the S&P. But take like another player that's in the top 5 or 7, like an Alphabet. Free cash flow has basically been chopping sideways since COVID. And that's not a real issue for the company. I mean, it is still free cash flow generative, 60, 70 billion a quarter, something like that for Alphabet. But it's just going sideways. And so it's not an issue for the business model, it's an issue for the valuation at something like $4.7, $4.8 trillion for somebody that has this run rate, a couple $100 billion in free cash flow. So what's a proper multiple for that? I don't know. And the issue with Alphabet and NVIDIA, Microsoft, whatever these names are, the top, all of them, Broadcom is, the business model is so complex for all of them. I mean, okay, well, you got Google Cloud and you have search. And then also there's Waymo over here, and it's just like, I guess maybe the scientific word for it is just and then we have to get to the bottom of this and then decide whether or not the broad market is going to be rallying on account of 10 or 15 different business units. And so you go back and you think about dominant players over the last half century at any given time, major influencers. I mean, could you understand an ExxonMobil business model when it was the number one name in the S&P 500? I can generally understand that business. Now, maybe General Electric, when it was top of the heap 25 years ago, that's really complex because that was a conglomerate. That was a big, ugly conglomerate too. But that's one of the issues is that these, maybe it should be the C word, conglomerate, to describe a lot of these players. They make acquisitions left and right. Antitrust regulators never seem to stop any of it. And then look at Meta as it stands today. It's just basically the sum of a ton of acquisitions. And then you're trying to figure out what's the Meta business model. It's ad trends, and then there's the old legacy Facebook, and I think you have to call it legacy because who's even on Facebook anymore? And then there's the AI business. Well, is that a failure or is that going to be a success? It seems like it was a failure. So there's all these moving parts, and the problem is we all end up having to be AI specialists to get a feel for whether or not the S&P 500 is going to go up or down.
Right.
And I wonder if, as a collective, there's something lurking out there that we're missing that you and I haven't figured out yet, that maybe the AI infrastructure build out is something like the old global crossing with the fiber optic cable, that they're setting the table for your life to be better and my life to be better, but maybe not for the S&P 500 to be better because they're just so capital intensive. So that's the short story long, I guess.
Okay, yeah, you possibly have the setup for this kind of almost boom-bust cycle, as you've described, where it benefits you longer term because you've built this all out, and you have that infrastructure, the capacity there, but at some point it's a bit overvalued in that process. I think you see similarities at times when you look at the energy markets or oil in terms of the boom-bust cycle. That said, so maybe it's not over, but maybe you proceed with caution here, just given that some of these multiples are elevated, and I think, as you mentioned, that can certainly continue. I don't know if I'd want to short new all-time highs in the market every day, right? It doesn't seem to work out. All that said, Where else are you focused? Where do you see value in the market? And do you drive any signals from, even on a sector to sector basis?
Yeah. Well, it's one of these things where you say, okay, I mean, think about the audience on a show like this. These are people who are following the market. Okay, these are people who've read thousands of pages worth of literature. And you think about, okay, to the extent that I'm, let's say somebody who's concerned, this guy just said 22 times earnings. I can get a 5 handle on a long bond right now. To hell with the S&P, I'm out of here. That's somebody watching the show right now. And that's a legitimate argument. You can get a 5er now on a long bond. What, 5.03, 5.04? That's different from where we were a few months ago. And to the extent that you're completely out, and the 7,500 or 7,400 on the S&P goes up to 10,000. That's a live possibility. That could. Yeah. Then you've basically screwed over your retirement relative to your peers. I guess. Just a massive underperformance. And so, if you're trying to stay the course, you need to try to figure out where could there be some valuation plays if you're not totally bought in on the AI story. Let's say. Now, when we're doing long-term screen, whether this market cares about 20 and 30-year long-term concepts, healthcare is screening cheap.
Okay.
That one. Okay, so when we run the S&P 500 healthcare, which is an amalgamation of a lot of different business models, I grant you, and the state of healthcare oscillates between medical devices and pharma and biotech, what have you. When we pull that, we have the same profitability metrics on the S&P 500 healthcare compared to the S&P 500 itself.
Wow.
Right, so in terms of and your profitability is a function of your margins, how efficiently you operate with your asset base. Classic example would be if the old saying, if all of my property, plant, and equipment gets on the elevator every day, then that is essentially an intellectual property business, right? So you can run a high ROE if there is no factory or there is no plant, there is no equipment. It's just people on laptops, which is Silicon Valley. So if you think about that, you can have a very high ROE and also a high ROA, I suppose. Now, 18.5 is the ROE, return on equity for healthcare. 18.5 is the broad markets ROE, which is a nice number. The S&P 500 is a very high quality index. It's when we at WisdomTree are benching stuff, we prefer to bench it to other indices because the S&P really does have 500 generally pretty solid businesses in it. But now when you look at, when we were pulling the other day, the price to sales ratio, whether we want to give any credence to the price to sales, the broad markets price to sales, as everybody watching this can picture, it goes the melt up into November of 21, and then the melt down, and then now back up to new numbers, like 3.5 for the broad markets price to sales. And healthcare, which is still generating revenues as a collective, has been drifted. It's hard for people to conceptualize that a price to sales ratio on a data set that's 20 or 30 years long, and in the last 3 or 4 years with a raging bull market, generally leaving healthcare behind, that price to sales ratio has drifted down to 1.5. And so now you got 350 minus 1.5 is the gap between the price to sales on the market and healthcare. That's as wide as anything on record. We're putting that stuff out on social. And one of the guys came in and was talking about one of the ETFs that's tracking medical devices, not a WisdomTree ETF. Man, the RSI on this thing was like 10. Wow. And you say, wow, I didn't really realize medical devices were tanking that badly because it does feel like there's a frenzy going on. But that's just the type of situation we have here. There's some stuff that's been really put out by the dumpster right now.